what's this, Don?
It's the wing of my fly fan.
And where'd this thing come from?
Come from home.
And where's home, man?
Utah.
Utah. And how many hours away is Utah from my house?
About 12 hours.
12-hour drive to show me this thing, huh? So what is it? What manufacturer makes this thing?
This is a Fly Fan Extra 300. Comes from the Slovakian Republic.
Dang, that's a long way away. What's the cool sticker up here?
Down on the deck. Hell of a website.
And what kind of servos you got in this thing?
High-tech 5945s.
Wow. And what's with the protractor nonsense on there?
Well, I don't know. You tell me, Joe.
Okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going to show you why we put these protractors on this pretty wing. You got to see these things in person too to really appreciate what a nice job that Don did on them and how great these colors look. It's the first big plane that I know of that Don has done, ground up. All of it came out really great. Don did a great job on it. And we're going to program the servos. We're going to show you how we set up the geometry, and then hopefully we're going to show you some great maiden videos on this thing pretty quick here. Alright, let's get to it. What we're always told is that the servo arm should be exactly perpendicular to the servo body when the control surface is in its neutral position. That is not actually the best way to set things up, and I'm going to show you why. What we should be after here is having the servo arm move the same distance in each direction off a to-be-determined neutral point. That is to say, having the servo arm move the same distance, same number of degrees here, off of its neutral point, that the control surface ends up moving the same distance in each direction off its point. Here, for instance, maybe 3 inches up and 3 inches down off of its neutral position should also in turn show this servo arm going the same number of degrees in each way off its neutral point. How that's determined is by the length of the push rod. That's what we have to establish, is there's an exact length for a push rod. Once that push rod length is the exact length it should be, this arm's not necessarily going to be in the neutral position. It depends on the offset, many other geometric features. You'll have to adjust it, whatever length it needs to be, to where from that given determined neutral point, you move the servo arm the same number of degrees each direction. This surface now moves the same degrees in each direction. Then we need to start thinking about the fact that the wings are tapered in their thickness. They're fatter towards the root, they're thinner towards the tip. So when you have multiple servos on a surface like this, there's going to be a dimension between the center of the hinge line and the center of the pivot point of the control horn that needs to be the same throughout the wing. Well, with the wing being a different thickness, the height of the control post is going to be different. You can eyeball that pretty close, you can measure it pretty close, but the protractor gauges, paper protractors we're using, is a great way to accurately establish that. So it has a twofold purpose. First, it establishes this very critical position, the length of the push rod that creates this position of the servo arm that gives us this linearity of exact even throw. When you move that stick left or right, giving the surface, the aileron in this case, the same movement up or down. If you don't, you can imagine what's going to happen. And in many planes that you'll check this, that people don't think about this is going to be the case. It's going to move, let's say, 30 degrees one way and 50 degrees the other. Well, all that's compensated for by a matchbox or the radio settings, but the speed is not going to be. So when it's going that 30 degrees to move the aileron, let's say 3 inches, then it's going to be going very quickly. When it goes to 50 degrees to move the aileron 3 inches the other way, it's going to be going much slower. We will first establish those neutral points. We'll have an even distance that the servo arms are traveling, but invariably it will be a different distance. This might be 50 degrees each way, this one might be 47 degrees each way, this one might be 51 degrees each way. Then, by controlling or adjusting the heights of the control horns, shorter on the inside and taller as we go out, and keep adjusting them until all the arms are, let's say, moving the aileron 3 inches up and down. And they're all doing that by, let's say, moving 50 degrees left and right off of a given neutral point. Now we have perfect geometry. From that point, we can either program, we can run matchboxes or equalizers, or we can go old school and adjust the linkages themselves to match the servos. A lot of the old school guys think that's an okay way to do it, but what I've just showed you for the last few minutes, or tried to show you, lets you know that that's not a good way to do it. If you start adjusting the sub-trims, adjusting the pushrod length, adjusting the control horn heights in order to match the servos, then you've immediately lost your linearity for the plane. You've lost anything axial. You've just opened the door for all kinds of compensations that you're going to have to make. You're going to have to make adjustment after adjustment. You're never going to have the plane straight. So it pretty much rules out in my mind the idea that you don't need to synchronize your servos electronically somehow or another. The next option from there, once you set this all up, is to use an equalizer, matchbox, radio type device, which is going to allow you to leave the setup linear and perfect, and is going to match the servos at the neutral point and each endpoint. What it's not going to do is match them between all those points. The matchboxes type devices, equalizer type devices, radios, all they can adjust is sub-trim. When you adjust your sub-trim, even a couple of points, your servo is no longer linear. You're not programming the servos. The servo, all digitals are programmed at the factories, but the only people that allow you to program them in the field is high-tech. So what you're doing when you adjust the sub-trim, even a few degrees, and then you adjust your endpoints, is you are going to be quicker one way versus the other every time. It's so easy to see on elevator halves. If you have a plane with a third scale with elevator halves, and you put a couple servos on one on each side, and you don't have a programmer, and you go to extreme throws on it, 3D throws, 45 degrees each way or more, and you adjust the sub-trims and the endpoints until they are matched, and then you flip the stick on your radio up and down, pretty fast, go all the way down, then flip it all the way up. Do that a couple times. And watch those elevator halves, and they're not going to go up synchronized and matched. They'll go up at different times and rates. And that's because you've adjusted the sub-trim. Well, people try to work that all out as best they can for their elevators, but they don't even think about it on their ailerons. And the problem is that they don't know it's happening. They don't see it happening. It's not affecting anything. What it's doing is binding. If you can set your servos up perfectly like this with the geometry, and then you can actually have the servo programmed to where its neutral is this determined neutral point that you came up with. And there's splines and all kinds of factors that keep other servos from doing that. And its endpoints are these endpoints that you've established, which we already know are an equal distance, because we've taken the time to do the geometry and make them an equal distance. And we've adjusted the control horn height so that they're all moving the same distance together to get the surface to move the same distance. Then we got perfect geometry, we got a perfect matching, we got perfect synchronization, we got servos that are fighting each other at absolutely no time. All three are working together perfectly throughout all the range. So we got better runtime on our batteries, we got longer life on our servos, we got no servo failures to speak of. We got a perfect setup. And this is what I'm after. The nice thing about it, beyond the runtime, beyond the quiet non-buzzing plane, beyond the free-feeling surfaces, is just pulling an upline, cranking over an aileron one way or another, and watching the plane do perfect axial rolls all the way to the moon, and not having to give any other inputs to do that. Why did I start thinking about this? Why did I start learning that this is how this stuff should be set up? Well, it's when I started flying high-techs, got the programmer, and realized that I didn't just have to make a bunch of compensations on here to get these things to quit breaking and buzzing and having trouble. I realized that with the programmer I can program it any way I want, so if I have that feature, then why not take advantage of it and set everything up with perfect geometry?